What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 15 of the Existential Podcast with me, Randy, and Danny.
Hey, Randy.
Hey, Danny. Today we are talking about how to get a world-class education, wait for it, for free.
Ooh, for free?
What's better than free?
Not much, man. I love free.
I mean, maybe getting paid to get an education.
That would also be, that is nice. Yeah, getting paid is nice to get an education.
Yeah, but today, in this day and age, we live in a time when it's possible to get a world-class, an Ivy League education for free.
It really is. Yeah, you can, there's so many ways to get educated actually nowadays. More than there has ever been. It's so easy. And we're going to talk about that. I do want to note, though, this is the Existential Stoic Podcast.
What did I say?
The Existential Podcast.
Oh, wow.
So we should be clear, right?
I'll get it. By episode 17, I'll get it.
We'll have it down. Don't worry. We got plenty of time.
No need to edit or cut or re-record. Absolutely not.
No, I like that. That was good.
Yeah. So, education. I always like the quote by Mark Twain. He says, "I never let my schooling interfere with my education."
Oh, that's a good quote. I like that.
Yeah. Because for me, up until I was probably out of high school, I thought they were the same thing. Probably even out of college, I thought they were the same thing. I thought schooling and education were the same thing. But it turns out they are distinctly different.
Well, we're taught to think that they're the same, right? We're taught to think that, because, it makes sense. We go to school from a young age, right? And, you go through all these processes and you think learning, you associate it with school, you associate it with the building, with the individuals that are in the building, the faculty, the teachers, what have you, right? So it makes sense to make that association. But there is some problems with that association, right? Which is, I think a lot of people struggle with this, is when you're not in school, you feel like you can't learn because you don't have a teacher. You don't have an authority, right?
100%. And not only that, you kind of have to look at the aims of schooling and education. So the aim of schooling is to make you fit into society. And specifically, it's to make you fit into a society during the Industrial Revolution, which no longer exists.
It hasn't changed. Literally hasn't changed, yeah.
But an education is actually how to live the best, happiest, most successful life that you can.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think education is that broader idea of, your whole life, not just this one sort of facet of it or this one idea, or really this indoctrination, right? That's what school is, it's indoctrination.
100%. Yeah, and so kind of looking at education today, we're going to look at both education and schooling. And I think to begin with, kind of looking at education in what it means. Like, it comes from the Latin educare, which means to draw out, to bring out, to develop, to grow, to cultivate something from within you.
I think cultivate's a good word, right? Figuring out those things within you, those talents, skills, abilities that you have, those interests that you have, drawing them out, developing them, making them grow, right?
Yeah. And to me, at least in my mind, it's distinctly different from schooling, because when I think of cultivate, I think of you reap what you sow. Whereas, you have to put in the effort and then you'll get something from it. Whereas schooling is just you have to show up and then you get your degree. Nowadays, it's you have to pay the money and then you get your degree.
Unfortunately, it's becoming that. I think there is, in a lot of ways, schooling has become, a matter of being there, getting that piece of paper, because that's all that matters. And I think that emphasis on the end product is what the problem is, because really, it is true, right? You will get what you put in the sense that, you can get an education in school, but you're putting a lot of work in, whereas most people aren't going to do that, right? They're going to just get the paper. Yeah, exactly.
Do the bare minimum.
Slide through.
So I guess to begin with, why don't we start with our story of schooling and education?
I was thinking that too. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, Danny and I actually re-met in high school.
We did, yeah.
We met first on the teat.
Yes, we did. On the teat. Like we're fucking cows. Yeah. Actually, no, we did. Our mothers were actually in the same, what was it, like
a Leche League.
Yeah.
A nursing club.
A nursing club.
And so we met back then, but I guess I don't even know if we really knew we met back then.
I don't think we did.
But then in high school, we were sitting next to each other, and I think pre-algebra or something like that, and then
it was honors pre-algebra. Yeah. That's where we met.
Yeah. Interesting times, and then we've been best friends since.
Yeah, so we were technically best friends since we were 0.
I know.
But we just aren't aware of that, and there was a little bit of a gap.
And surprisingly, we both still like teats.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, nothing changed.
Yeah. So.
Just not our mothers.
Right. Yeah, different teats, yeah.
Oh my God. Anyway.
Okay, so it's a family podcast, that's why I had to say teats.
It is a family podcast.
All right. So, why don't you go? You want to go first?
About our education stories?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go first.
I mean, it's funny. We've also both been in school quite a lot. We spent a lot of time in school in our lives. So, we both went to the, we didn't go to the same schools early on, but we went to the same high school, obviously. We both went to college afterwards. So, I mean, our stories are similar in that sense.
What's yours?
My
what
story?
did you do after high school?
That's what I'm going to say, man.
Okay.
I'm getting there. All right. Anyway, so I went to a small private liberal arts school for college right out of high school. I ended up, my problem was when I was in high school, I kind of liked all the subjects that I was studying. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I wasn't one of those kids who was going to college with a clear idea of like, this is what I'm going to study. And so when I got to undergrad, I just took a shotgun approach because I knew how much I didn't understand the loans fully that I was signing. I didn't understand what I was paying. Yeah, nobody did, right? But I did know that I was paying it because I was taking them out in my name. So I did have this awareness and I wanted to get the most I could out of this experience. So I took a shotgun approach the first year. I just took a bunch of different courses in different subjects and I fell in love with philosophy and that kind of carried me forward. So I ended up getting a degree in philosophy in undergrad. Then I got my master's in philosophy out in Texas. And then ultimately started teaching. This was back in like 2008 that I got my master's. I started teaching. And I did do some additional graduate work at Temple. So I did a lot of schooling. I was in school for 8 years or something? I don't know, a long time. And it's interesting because I've always found in college, and as a teacher, I can also say this, teaching college level classes, I think in most classes there's a few kids who really are being educated in the sense that they're putting a lot of work in. Like when I was in undergrad, I can remember a couple of my friends, like in philosophy classes, we would get together after class, go through the material, try and figure it out. It was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. And I can't say I hate that time period or anything. I'm more frustrated by the system and the money and the way everything is set up. I should say I really enjoyed my time in school.
I'm glad you mentioned the money twice because that right there would 100% change the argument against schooling.
Yeah.
So right now, at least in the United States, on average, kids are paying $20,000 to $40,000 a year to go to university.
I think that's actually going up.
Yeah.
It's closer to 50 now, yeah.
$50,000 on average per year. Ivy Leagues, they're paying almost $100,000 a year for an undergrad education.
When you factor everything in, it's insane.
And there is literally no way that you can provide an education of that much value.
No, you cannot. It's impossible.
Yeah. However, these same educations, if they were free or if they were reasonably priced, then that would be worthwhile. Like I remember my grandfather used to tell me all the time. He studied chemistry at the College University of New York. Long time ago, he got a job as a chemist, worked on the Manhattan Project. But he used to tell me when they wanted to increase the cost of credits from 5 cents to 10 cents, and the whole school went on per credit, and the whole school went on strike.
Well, that's double the price. That's insane. 10 cents. Right.
But compare that with how much kids are paying per credit nowadays, over $1,000 a credit.
Oh, over 1,000, yeah.
And the quality of education has not improved that much.
No, the worst part is not only has it not improved, it hasn't changed. The style of education has not even changed in most cases. Mm-hmm. In most cases, it hasn't changed at all. Yeah.
And it's the same classrooms, the same style of teaching. Nothing has changed, but the amount that you're paying for the education.
It's the same goddamn buildings in a lot of cases, literally. Mm-hmm. Like, they haven't even updated anything.
Yeah. So.
Well, it's funny, too. They give you this, there's this sort of, smoke and mirrors thing, too, I think. This, with all this technology and stuff, there's this, idea that it's changed. But the teaching style has not. Mm-hmm. And I can attest to that. I think, it's funny, but, colleges are very resistant to changing, because you have a system of grading, you have a system of evaluation, and it's hard to break that. I mean, honestly, as a faculty member, I love my courses where I can get good discussion going, and students are really engaged because they're learning something on their own. Mm-hmm. That is education. I mean, that's the best. But the problem is it's hard to grade. Mm-hmm. Because, it's different for everyone, and there's different interests, different levels, whatever, it's difficult. So this system of grading really kind of, I think, shackles us in a way.
Yeah. So I'll talk about my education.
Okay.
So we went to the same high school, and this was like a high school in upper middle class area where it was basically expected that you went to college. And not only that it expected that you went to college, but expected that you went to a name brand college. Because I remember friends that went to community college were looked on as not good enough.
Yeah, at the time that we went, I mean, I think community college has a very different, there's a very different view of it now because of costs have gotten so out of control. But at the time, yeah, we went, it was definitely looked down upon.
Yeah. And so I didn't myself want to go to college. I was actually looking at joining the Marines, but my parents forbade it. They said they would like, disown me or whatever if I joined the Marines. So I went to college. I didn't do much looking at colleges. I applied to one college, I got in, and that's where I went.
I only applied to one college too. That's so funny.
Yeah, and so I didn't have any real plan of what to do with my life, but I had just finished reading the book Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, and the protagonist of that story had studied physics and philosophy, so I was like, all right, I'll study physics and philosophy. Yeah.
Well, I think you had the same fundamental problem that I did, is that you liked learning. You liked all the stuff that there was nothing in high school that I disliked necessarily about the material, right? And that's hard because then you have to choose.
Yeah. But there was no clear direction in terms of how am I going to benefit from college? It was just, college was like a stepstone that you're assumed have to take in the progression of your life.
I'm glad you mentioned that too, yeah, because I think especially there's more, kids get a bit more emphasis now on understanding what they're going to do afterwards. But especially when we went, man, it was just looked at as like, yeah, this stepping stone. So do whatever you want, but it's a stepping stone. And I think, I didn't think about what the hell I was going to do afterwards either.
It's just a costly stepping stone. If there were no cost associated with college, I would say, yeah, that was great. I did that, whatever.
It was awesome, yeah.
But most people end up leaving college with debt. And that is the newest form of slavery. This is debt that you cannot bankrupt out of. There are two ways out of it. One, you pay it off. Two, you die.
The other problem is too, what I hate about it is they call it financial aid. It's a loan, and interest starts accruing the second you start school, which is insane. Because, if you need a loan to pay for college, you don't have money to pay down the interest or pay the loan off while you're in school. It's not like the old days where it was 5 cents a credit. You could get a part-time job and pay for school,
Yeah, student loans are one of the largest sources of revenue for the U.S. government right now.
So right now, student loans are at $1.7 trillion. Last I looked, which was in November. Yeah. Which is an insane amount of money.
It's an insane amount of money. Most people think that you're just going to carry them for life until you're forgiven. But the thing is, people don't do the math with the loan forgiveness. So a lot of these loan forgiveness programs, they say in 20 years, we'll forgive your loan. You just have to pay the taxes on it. But they don't do the math, because in 20 years at 6% on average, that means rule of 72, it's going to double every 12 years, let's say every 10 years.
Which is ridiculous.
You'll owe 4 times what you owe now in 20 years. Well, you pay taxes on that, which is 25%, which is the exact amount that you owe right now.
Yep.
So basically, and taxes are the only other type of debt that you cannot bankrupt out of.
Yeah.
So basically, you are setting yourself up for a life of slavery just to go to school for an education that you really don't need to go there to get.
Yeah, and actually, since this, just to help people listening, if you are really struggling with student loan debt, it is true that it's very difficult to bankrupt out of them. I had been doing some research recently and found that they are starting to allow it in certain cases. And the reason why I wanted to mention this was that if you are really struggling and can prove that you cannot live your life basically because of this debt, which I think most of us could probably prove in some way, shape, or form, it is worth looking into. I would suggest it just because it is an option. You might be able to get them greatly reduced.
And also, if it has you feeling really down, and you're thinking about suicide, don't do that. Just call a suicide prevention hotline, 1-800-APE-TALK.
Yeah.
Or also, there's one other thing that, you should think about that's actually good news in terms of student debt holders, is that the U.S. just printed 25% of all the money it's ever printed since 1776. It just did that in 1 year.
Yeah.
So that means however much you owe, you technically only owe about 80% of that right now.
It's worth a lot less.
Yeah.
That is helpful. The other thing, too, to keep in mind is that you're not alone. There's 1.7 trillion of this debt in this country, which means a lot of people are carrying it.
Yep.
And I think that helps me sometimes when I'm struggling with that thought, is that, look, I'm not alone. A lot of people are going through this. We'll figure out a way to get through it, right?
Yep. Yeah, so then I got a degree in physics and philosophy, and I ended up getting a job as a computer programmer. I didn't like it. I quit. I moved to France. My parents said I had to get some type of profession. So I was like, people used to tell me I should be a vet when I was a kid. Maybe I'll do that because I liked animals. So I went to vet school.
Who doesn't like animals?
Yeah, right? So I went to vet school, and did that, which was another 4 years. And so that was pretty much the end of my formal schooling.
Well, you know what? That's another good point to mention, one of the things that always frustrated me is that, it's like you want to do something else. And the only way, a lot of times, is to go back into debt in these schools because you need this piece of paper,
But is that the only way?
That's the other thing, right?
Ooh,
Things
maybe we should make an episode about that. Ooh, maybe we did.
Ooh, damn, thinking ahead.
Yeah. So, if you can't rely on schooling, what can you rely on?
Oh, this is interesting. I think now more than ever, I remember when I was in college, and you'll remember this too, right? Because we're old enough that we remember not having cell phones, not having the internet. That stuff was fairly new. When I was in undergrad, I remember using AOL Instant Messenger. That was the thing, and it was not fast. It was slow and terrible. That aside, though, I used to have to go to the library all the time to look up information because there just wasn't a lot of. There was stuff online at the time, but not a lot. It was very limited. Access was difficult, especially to printed products. It was very hard. Nowadays, that's changed dramatically. I mean, there is so much information online between you can actually access actual courses, for free on Coursera, stuff like that. You can access YouTube, which has tons of informational stuff. You can learn specific skill sets. You can find any kind of printed material pretty much for free. At least, even take philosophy, which I love. There's a lot of free available books up there online that are pretty decent translations.
You mentioned Coursera and edX. They actually have Ivy League courses. The same courses you would pay $100,000 a year to get at Princeton or any of these other Ivy League universities, you can get for free online. That's literally how to make $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
Is just take those courses.
And the other thing too is, and don't forget, I think one of the important things is if you're taking these just to improve yourself, there is value in that. And even if you don't get the paper, there is value in that. I think it's crucial to keep that in mind.
Yeah. And I hear a lot of people saying, but I need a college degree. I'll never be looked on. I'll never succeed without a college degree. As a matter of fact, there was a study that I was just made aware of where they took a look at all of the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. And the CEOs that did not graduate high school made on average 30% more than the rest of the CEOs.
Isn't that funny?
Isn't that funny? You're way more successful if you don't graduate high school.
Well, there's also a lot of stories of success of people that they dropped out of college. I mean, a lot of these successful individuals did. I think, did Steve Jobs drop out?
Steve Jobs, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates,
whole
bunch of different, Mark Zuckerberg, whole bunch of different people. Because here's the thing, going to school teaches you how to follow directions. And you know what? The value of following directions nowadays, it isn't that valuable right now.
No, and I think, again, I think the other important thing to keep in mind too is, look, going to school, that's it, right? It teaches you to conform. It doesn't teach you to think outside the box. It doesn't teach you to think originally. And unless you're going to put a lot in, you're not going to get much out at all. I mean, I can tell you now, I see so many kids come through the classroom these days where I know this is a pointless endeavor for them because they're not engaged enough to make the schooling worthwhile to educate themselves. They're being schooled, they're not being educated. And I think there's a huge difference, right? And they're just wasting money and time. Whereas, you could be doing tons of different things, getting work experience, doing all sorts of things, living life, figuring things out in different ways where you might discover what you actually like.
Yeah. One of my coworkers was just telling me how she's so happy for her son. He just got into college. And then she started complaining. She's like, it's $45,000 a year. Where are we supposed to get this money from? And I was just thinking in my mind, and I was like, well, tell him not to go to college. Don't let him take out the debt. And she's like, oh, he's not taking out the debt. We're paying for it for him. And I was like, why don't you just give him $45,000 a year and tell him to go explore the world, to go attempt to build a business, to blow the money. Because really, blowing $45,000 would not be that different from going to school because you'd get an education from blowing that money.
And you wouldn't have the actual interest that comes along with it. Not to mention, too, you could take some of that money and he could try investing. And, learn the stock market, learn how to invest, understand what finances are. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things you can do.
I mean, you look at that, $40,000 a year, that's $160,000 for 4 years. You put that in an account that gets 10%, that's $16,000 a year that you can make for doing nothing.
Yeah. I mean, it's insane. And I think one of the things we should talk about is, right, how do you learn on your own, right? Because I think this is something people do struggle with, because we're taught our whole lives that we go to school to learn. We come home, we do what the teacher told us to do, homework and stuff, right? There's a structure to it.
Right.
So how do we learn on our own? And I think this is a lesson for life, right? Because all of us should be learning, I think, throughout our lives. It should be something that we never give up. We never stop. I think it's one of the things I love about, like, philosophers is these are all individuals who spent their whole lives doing this. They never stopped learning, never stopped really exploring new ideas and I mean, all my heroes that I look back in the past are really individuals like that. They're individuals who spent their whole lives working on these projects, coming up with new ideas. Like, I think that is crucial.
Yeah, I think the important thing in learning how to learn these things is get involved in it. Like, this is one of my biggest frustrations with schooling is that let's say for instance you want to become a veterinarian, and we'll just say this because I have experience in this. So you go to a school where you do nothing that veterinarians do. You theorize about what veterinarians do. You learn every single disease, 99% of which you'll never ever see, and you do that for 4 years and pay a lot of money to do it. Then when you finish, you go out into the real world, you work with a veterinarian and realize you don't know anything. The nurses that have been working there for a year know way more than you ever do, and you literally know how to do nothing, but you have a piece of paper that says you're a licensed veterinarian. I'm
glad you brought that up. If I just jump in, a really good student that was in one of my classes, he's done. He's going to go to med school. He wants to go. But we were talking, and it's funny because he was complaining. He said, they make you memorize all this stuff that his relatives are doctors. No doctors memorize. They look it up because there's Google, there's books, there's reference guides. You don't look up the doses. You don't need to memorize every dosage of medication for every disease. That's an insane amount of knowledge for no reason.
Yeah, like point in case, one of the biggest obstacles to people getting into medical school and veterinary school is a course called biochemistry, where they make you memorize every single part of the Krebs cycle. Since I finished that course 12 years ago, I have not one day of my life even thought about or spoken about or used any of that information from the Krebs cycle.
Until mentioning it just now.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, and the funny part is, even if you needed it, you would look it up.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, look, the fact is, no matter what you do in life, when you're doing it practically, you're engaged in it all the time, you seek out the information to solve the problems that you need. Mm-hmm. You don't try and learn everything all at once first. That makes no sense. That's an insane way to do things.
Yeah, I think the better way to do it is what they used to do back in the day with the apprenticeship type of thing.
Yeah.
Where you'd be an apprentice and then a journeyman and then a master or whatever it was, where basically you wanted to do something, you go find somebody who does what you want to do, and you follow them around. And then they give you tasks that maybe you have to clean up the workshop, maybe you have to do whatever. You run errands for them, and then eventually you get some hands-on experience. And so by the time you're actually getting to the learning portion of it, you have a lot of hands-on experience. You have a lot
practical
of
knowledge. Yeah. And it's funny, I think there's a lot of industries that are still sort of like that today. You see, especially with like the quote-unquote trades, you talk about like electricians, plumbers, those sorts of things still have that sort of system in place, I believe.
Yeah, and it's great because you can go there, you pay nothing for the education, you make more than somebody who has a 4-year college degree that they paid $100,000+
Yeah,
for.
and you also, the good thing about that system too is you actually get a chance to try it out first. Because I think this is the other problem with education is, you're asking people to, or with school, you're asking people to pick something to do for the rest of their lives, learn all this information about it, but no practical side. And then you get into it and you could hate it. Yeah. That's the other issue because you have no clue what it's actually like to do the job.
Yeah. Yeah. Me, perfect example. I've been working as a veterinarian for 8 years now. I hate the job. I think it's absolutely terrible because we have to put animals down all the time. We're dealing with sick pets and, and really it's dealing with people in very stressful situations. It's nothing with dealing with happy, friendly pets, which is the reason that I became a veterinarian. So it's absolutely nothing different from how I got into it. But it's something that I've had to do to pay off the debt associated with going to veterinary school.
Well, that's the thing. You're locked into it, right? Mm-hmm. Because you really, the only option is, that's the problem too with college, is you get locked into this field because the only way to change that field, it seems like, is to go back to school, pay all this money, and you're screwed again, right? And then you're trapped in another career you don't even know if you want to be in.
Yeah. So, how to learn outside of school. And I've been doing this for a long time. And basically, one, you have to do what you have to do while you have to do it. So, right now I have to work as a veterinarian while I have to work as a veterinarian.
That's a great point, I think, though. It's crucial, right? you have to keep in mind these things take time. Don't expect immediate results, and you have to keep doing what you have to do to live. That's always important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but then all of my spare time, I take that to teach myself something new. Now, one of the things that I teach myself right now is computer programming. And this is something that I'm passionate about, that I enjoy doing, and that potentially has a very lucrative future. And so how I do it is I just get into it.
Yeah, it's the best way, right?
Like, how do you do it? You just do it.
Yeah, it's funny, actually, I think that's a great example, because it doesn't matter if it's computer programming, science, philosophy, literally any of these, the best way to get into it is get into it. Mm-hmm. You start with it, start at an intro level, start something small, see where you're at, work on it, and when you get stuck, you seek out experts that can help you get through the problem. And because basically when you're engaged in something and you run into problems and you figure out how to solve them on your own, you will learn at a much faster rate. That is basically, you're taking your education into your own hands. And I think this is what's crucial, because it's actually life affirming, right? It affirms your own self-empowerment, your own, ability to discover yourself and figure out what you're good at, right?
And it really takes two things. It takes get-to-itiveness.
Yeah.
And it takes stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah.
So basically, you need to take the action, and then you need to persist and keep taking the action, because that eventually will get you where you want to go. And another thing that I've found that is helpful is this is something that you don't get from the school system, is basically there's I would say you're not either, in the school system, you're either a student or a professor. There's above and there's below. Okay? Whereas in real life, you're somewhere on the ladder.
On the spectrum, yeah.
You're better than some and worse than some.
In everything, yeah.
And this is one of the best things for you in terms of learning, is that you can learn from those that are better than you, and you can teach those who know less than you.
Always, yeah. You can always do that.
Yeah, and that reinforces learning. So that's something that I've done multiple times. So one of the businesses that I started was a YouTube channel. And when I got into it, I didn't know anything about YouTube, and I didn't know anything about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, which was a topic of it. And so I just started learning, and then I started teaching. And I did them both at the same time. So I would learn stuff, I would teach stuff, because I knew that I knew more than some and I knew less than others.
And that's a great method, because it actually keeps you engaged. It keeps you learning. It keeps you doing something, right? And figuring new things out. And it's funny, I think one of my favorite quotes, I think it was Aristotle, that said, you don't know something until you can teach it.
Yeah. Because
once you can teach it to someone else, then you actually understand it. And I think it's a good method, right? If you're trying to, even if you don't want to start a YouTube channel, that's obviously taking on a lot of other stuff. If you want to just start even like a study group with a friend, right? Where you pick a topic and you work together on it, because you're learning together. And it helps a lot by having, it also gives you kind of a direction, right? By having the channel, by trying to teach others, it gives you kind of a focus and it keeps you going.
Yeah.
Which I think is helpful.
Yeah, and so I still do that to this day. So I'm learning computer programming, I'm learning it, and at the same time, I'm teaching it to others. And by teaching it, they say learn one, do one, teach one. So, and that's what I try and do, is I learn it, I do it, I teach it. And so basically, the thing that stops a lot of people is this belief that they can't learn without a professor. I hear this from a lot of young people.
Yeah.
Like, I remember there was this girl I work with. She was like, how's school going? And this was the beginning of COVID, when they couldn't go to school. And she was like, I can't learn without a professor.
Oh, I've heard that a lot. Yeah.
And I was like, that's nonsense.
There. Yeah.
I was like, that's nonsense. All the information that's ever existed in the world, for the most part, is available at your fingertips.
But we're taught in the school system, right, that there are these experts, that they have this special ability to teach and to impart knowledge, and that if you don't have one of them, you can't do it, right? That's kind of the system. That's the way it's presented to us. And you have to break from that mold. You have to break that idea in order to start educating yourself. And you can do it. And I think there's also a huge benefit in educating yourself, which is you can try things out and figure out what you really love. Because I think one of the things you can't really do in school is do a lot of trial and error testing. You can't explore a bunch of stuff because you don't have time and you don't have the money. You're not going to spend 12 years in undergrad screwing around spending 50 grand a year or 100 grand a year. So you can't really explore all these different options. But in life you can. You can explore all sorts of things. I read during the lockdown, I read a book on quantum physics just because I felt like it. it's interesting. It's not something I'm necessarily going to pursue on my day-to-day, but I do enjoy it and I want to learn more about it. So I did that, and it's fun. So I think there is that side of it too. You can also just grow yourself and kind of see what you're good at, see what you like, see what you're passionate about.
That's a great point. There was a video I saw by Gary Vee a while ago where he was saying that the problem that most people have nowadays is they just don't know what they like. They haven't tried enough stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest problems is they get locked into this thing, and then they get down this road where they have a degree, they have all this debt, and then one of the worst things is they think that they screwed up and now they're behind.
Exactly, yes. And that's one of the worst feelings. It is.
Yeah. Yeah, and...
Well, it's special. The problem with that, too, is it's specialization. There's literally a degree for every goddamn thing now. Literally everything.
I mean, if there's not, you can make it up.
Yeah, and it's so absurd. I mean, there's so
all you have
specific.
to do is pay $50,000 a year and they'll make up a degree.
And you can literally make it up.
Yeah.
But they've gotten so specific, and it seems like every time you look at job postings, there's a specific degree for it, and you feel locked in. You feel trapped. And it's like, I understand that feeling, and then when you get out of school, trying to go back is hard, right?
Dude, I love your job posting thing. There's this story I got to tell you. So pretty much every job posting you will ever look at wants like 2 to 7 years of experience.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, so I remember a few years ago, like I said, I would do some stuff in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and one of the most popular cryptocurrencies is Ethereum. But at the time that this job posting was out, Ethereum had only been around for 4 years.
Yeah,
and the job posting asked for somebody with 7 to 10 years of experience with Ethereum. So it's like, they don't even know what these job postings are, and trying to define your life based on a job posting, I think, is kind of inaccurate.
It is, yeah. It doesn't make any sense. You can't even use them as a guide to what skills you need. A lot of them don't make any sense, and a lot of them are written by people who don't even understand the job that they're writing for. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's true, right? A lot of times it's people, they're actually taking a post from another company with the same type of job because they created this division, and they don't even change anything.
Yeah. So let's talk about how to get a world-class education. Like if you had to help somebody,
okay, to
get a world-class education for free.
All right. Well, I would say this. I mean, so coming at this from the perspective of someone who does teach, there is this idea, and I mean, it's pretty standard, but when you're teaching a course, right, in a college, one thing you want to do is they call it scaffolding. And backwards design. So
what does that mean?
So basically, backwards design is you think about what is the end goal of this course? What do I want students to come away with? And how do I design a course from that endpoint to get them there, right? And then scaffolding it refers to a set of skills. So say you're taking a philosophy class, and I want by the end of the course, I want you to understand the material and be able to do create a nice argument and write a term paper. Let's say that's the goal, right? So scaffolding, I would come up with assignments that incrementally work to that goal. So maybe, the first assignment would be a very short, summary, then a short analysis, then, kind of dip your feet into argumentative stuff, right? So you build up to that. The reason why I mention this is I think when you're trying to learn on your own and trying to educate yourself, picking small goals is a very useful way to help yourself stay motivated, and focus, because it can seem overwhelming. Like, say you want to learn computer programming, right? Say I want to jump into like Python or Go or whatever. If I just look online, I'm going to be overwhelmed by the amount of intro stuff, by the, skill level, because there's people that are literally programming software. I don't need that yet. I need to learn how to...
And you can get lost in all of the beginner stuff and just go from one to the other, to the other, to the other,
and never progress,
yeah.
Right? And that's the problem. And you also need to know basic stuff. Like, I started to learn Python a while back. I need to know, well, what do I need to download? What software do I need in order to actually do this? What's the best? So you have to do some research. So what I would say is, think about what you want to learn and set yourself small goals. So for instance, if I wanted to learn, say, Python, I would say, first, I need to find out, what do I need to learn Python? What are the stuff I need on my computer to actually start programming in a basic way? And what's a good intro course? I'm going to do that intro course, and then I'm going to move on. Don't stay in an introductory level. You should be progressing in a sort of systematic way. If you get stuck, look for other information, obviously, but I think that's a helpful method, right, is having some sort of progression.
Yeah, I really do agree with what you say there in first defining what it is you want to learn.
Yeah.
You want to do. That is so important. Like, it breaks my heart, all the kids that go to school with an undefined major.
Oh, God. Yeah.
It literally breaks my heart because they're literally, they don't realize a $50,000 a year tuition ends up being roughly $250 a month they're paying for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
So every year they're going to school, they're adding another $250 a year, or $250 a month that they have to pay for
payment. Yeah.
And they're doing this in an undecided fashion, when instead they could spare the expense, get a job in the real world. Like, probably one of the best jobs. People don't know this. If people knew this, then you wouldn't be able to get a job there. But one of the best jobs that you can get in life, and this is going to shock you, is at McDonald's. So the reason for this is that McDonald's has built up the best system, the best business system that exists. To this day, you go to any McDonald's anywhere in the world, you can get the same exact identical thing super quick. And so if you can go get a job at McDonald's and learn the systems, because then if you learn the systems, you can apply that system to anything you do in life and absolutely dominate.
That's a great point though too, right? Is that, you know, you could take time, instead of going right to college, you can take time off, gain real experiences, look at how things are being done. Not what you specifically are doing for a job, but looking at the broader picture, looking at how things are done and applying that to your life to then learn other things and figure out what you want to do, right? And what you want to focus on. I wish more kids did this. You know, I wish I even did this, you know, which is don't go to college right away, figure some stuff out, figure out what you want to do with your life, then go. I mean, because if you really want to go, that would be the time to go, when you know what you want to do, not when you have no fucking clue, right?
Yeah, spend 6 months doing this, 6 months doing this, 6 months doing the other, and then you get to figure it out. Because the thing is, like, everybody looks at these people like Kelly Slater, the surfer, or other people, and they're like, man, so lucky, I wish I could do that. Like, oh, he gets to surf every day and he loves it. And it's like, your life could literally be that.
You can do it. You can. You can do whatever you want.
We live in an infinitely abundant universe. You can literally do what you love and get paid for it.
And you know what the great part is we are problem-solving creatures. So if there is a life you want to live, there is a way to get there. It's just a matter of figuring it out, one step at a time, breaking it down. And I think that's what the whole idea of education is, right? Education is about learning how to solve your problems and learning to get the necessary requisite skills to do what you want to do. And that applies to everything. It doesn't, whether you want to, you know, become a surfer, pro surfer, whether you want to become a musician, whether you want to become a physicist, whatever you're doing, there's a way to do it. And I think, you know, like we said, right, if you want to learn, having a clear idea of what you want to do is important because, you know, any topic is huge. You know, if you look at science, there's how many different fields of science, right? If you look at philosophy, how many different types of philosophy, how many works that you would have to, so you need a kind of a starting point. And it doesn't matter what you, I mean, in some sense, it doesn't matter what you pick, just as long as you get started.
Yeah, we do live in a time of a ton of information.
Yeah.
One of the doctors I work with is 76 years old, and he always points to this one book that's about 2 inches thick. And he's like, when I graduated, that was all the veterinary knowledge right there in that one book.
That's it.
Now there's hundreds, if not thousands, of books that size. So, but another thing you mentioned that I think is really important is kind of the progression of where you want to get to. And I kind of look back towards the Latin term for educate, to draw out. Because I almost think that whatever it is we want to become in this world actually already exists within us.
Absolutely.
And so it's our job to find what that is and actually draw it out. It's like the gift that we were put here to develop, to bring to the world. And it exists in there. We just have to figure out what it is and bring it out.
Well, I think actually, you know, I think it's funny. The existentialist, the idea of authenticity, that's basically the idea, right? It's figuring out who you really are. And when you figure that out, things become easier because you're doing what is right for you. You're essentially doing what you were meant to do is another way to look at it if you want to think of it that way.
Yeah, and I think Socrates also believed that everybody had the answers within them. That's why he had the Socratic method of just questioning to kind of draw out the answers.
You're drawing that information out, right? Rather than sort of coming up out of thin air. Yeah, and I think, you know, with education, it is important. We need to think, you need to also, I think, remembering that you can do it is important. I think this idea that we can't do things prevents us. I mean, if you think you can't do something, you can't do it. That's the truth, right? Yeah. But we're all people. If people are doing something, other people can do it.
Yeah, if somebody else has done it, it's possible for you too.
Literally, it's the truth, right? And there's so many resources now, it's insane to do whatever you want. I mean, you can learn anything. There's no reason to prevent you from learning something. All you need is essentially the willpower to start. You need to have the motivation to start. You need to stick to it, right? and you need to be willing to solve problems.
Yeah.
And, I think sticking to it is the hard part. People very easily want to give up when it's difficult.
Yeah. So then once you figure out what it is that you want to learn, to do, I think there's kind of a balancing act that goes on at that time.
Yeah.
And it's a balancing act between being over your head in whatever you're learning and having it be too easy. And you've got to find the golden mean between the two, because you've always got to be pushing into what's over your head, and then at the same time just trying to know enough stuff to where you feel competent.
Yeah, there's a great example actually. If you took imagine if you wanted to learn say a sport, and you got a professional athlete, from that sport. I don't know, give me a professional athlete from
Pele.
sport. Okay.
Soccer,
right? So say I wanted to learn soccer, and I somehow knew him, and he was going to teach me, and we played together every day. He is going to get worse playing with me, right? Because I'm terrible. I've never played soccer before. I have no idea how to play soccer. I don't know the rules. So because he's at such a high skill level, to engage with me is actually going to lower his skill level. Whereas I'm going to probably increase relatively quickly because I have the best teacher you could possibly get, right? And so I think that's an important rule for educating yourself, which is if you try and go way above your level, you're going to probably get frustrated, or you're going to, maybe stymie yourself in some way or get kind of thrown off track. If you go way below your level, you're not going to ever progress. It's just going to be simple.
Yeah, trying to find stuff only 1 or 2 levels above where you are right now.
Yeah.
Because anything higher is just too high.
But take those challenges, though. Challenging yourself is critical because that's the way forward. I think that's one of the problems with education, with the schooling system is, it costs so much, they want everyone to get a degree. Because it costs so much, nobody in their right mind would go if they thought they weren't going to get the degree. The problem with that is you get very mediocrity, where a lot of people can kind of slide through, get the degree, but they don't really learn anything. Because all they had to do was show up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a problematic thing.
Yeah. And then just sticking with it. We mentioned this, persistence, endurance. That's a very stoic quality.
Yeah.
But persisting, enduring, just getting through.
And it's hard sometimes. It really is. You'll be frustrated, you'll struggle. But, I think the other thing too is, that's where we learn the most is when we struggle, is when we're sort of really facing a difficult problem. I think I can think back to all the times I've learned something really pronounced or had an epiphany. It was when I was struggling with something for months and then figured it out, right? And I think you'll know this with computer programming is a great example. Because computer programming is funny. You'll start out and it seems pretty simple, and then you'll hit this problem where you're all right, how the hell did they do that? And you just have to keep doing it. It's the only really way to learn is just keep plugging along and trying to work through it until you figure out, oh, that's what it is. Sometimes, you might need a different perspective on it, whatever, but you'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just losing the negative self-talk. Because really, our limits are basically set by ourselves. We're all infinite, unlimited, abundant creatures. And yet we set all these limits. I can't do this. I'll never be that. If I don't actually get a real degree from an Ivy League, I won't be worthwhile.
If I don't see results immediately, what's the point?
Yeah.
If I'm not making money from it right now, why bother? Or just in general, if I'm not, education is valuable in itself, right? Learning something new is valuable in itself. It doesn't even have to be for a specific goal. And I think that's the other thing people forget, is you can just have fun with it. If you already have a job you love, you can still learn new things. There's no reason not to, right? And that will still help you in life. It'll still benefit you because you're growing.
Yeah. There's a funny thing. So we talked in the beginning about how the difference between schooling and education, and how schooling is kind of just structured step by step. You just have to get through, whereas education is really becoming the best that you can be, having a happy, fulfilling, successful life. And I just finished reading a book called The University of Success, and it's basically written by this guy who was a bum, and he was homeless. And it was such a cold winter, I think in Chicago or somewhere, that the only place he could go to get warmth was in the public library.
So I've heard about this story,
While he was in there, he just started reading, and then he went on to start writing, and he wrote The Greatest Salesman in the World. His name is Og Mandino. Another book that he wrote is The University of Success. And it's crazy because the knowledge contained in that one book, The University of Success, had I have just spent 4 years studying that book, instead of studying all these theories and the different things that I was studying in university, I'm sure that I would have had so much more successful and fulfilling life by this point.
Well, here's the thing, right? I mean, I talk about this with my students all the time. Theories, they have to be applied, or they don't mean much at all. You're just talking about nonsense, really, until you apply it and see how it works. And I think this is what's crucial. You know, when you engage in educating yourself, you're actually going through the motions, trying things out, and I think importantly, you're not bound by the system. Because like we said, the schooling system is very structured. It's very much about conformity. It's very much about doing the same over and over again. Whereas, you know, you see all these wild stories of success, it's people breaking the rules. It's people trying something new. And when you educate yourself, you have the freedom to try new things. You might fail, but you'll learn from every failure, and you might learn something that no one's figured out yet because you tried something new. And I think that's crucial.
Absolutely. So I think I'd like to leave people with some tips on how to kind of get started learning and make the best out of their life, their time.
All right.
And what I'm thinking of are kind of a few different things. So one is get in the habit of reading. So Danny and I both read a lot. And I remember Will Smith told me a long time ago that, not personally, obviously, but he told me that all of the world's knowledge is already out there in books. Every experience you've experienced, everything you could want to do has already been done by somebody else, and it's been written down in a book.
Yeah.
And if you just take 20 minutes a day to read, you'll still end up reading way more than everybody else. You'll read a few books in a year. And listen, if you read just 5 books on any topic, you'll be one of the foremost, most knowledgeable people in that topic.
Yeah, it's all you need really to do. It's insane.
Yeah. The average American reads 1 book a year.
Yeah, and we've done that 100 times this year already.
Yeah, and so by doing that, it's such an easy way to get knowledge. But even easier, because listen, a lot of people don't like to read. My dad was that way for a long time. Audiobooks nowadays.
Yeah, right.
And in your car, you're stuck in your car in traffic anyways. Use that time, instead of listening to talk radio or whatever else, to actually learn something. Read a book by listening to it, and that will get you further.
Yeah, instead of listening to the news that just frustrates you and makes you angry, that you can't control, listen to something that betters you, right? That makes you feel better, that makes you happy. And, you know, on that note about reading books, it is important to point out, you don't have to read only books about, like, you know, a subject like science. You can read fun books, fantasy books, you know, whatever. As long as you're reading, I think that it also gets you engaged in new experiences, new ideas. It gets your imagination going, your creativity going. Yeah. And I find that's hugely valuable, right? You learn to see things from different perspectives. You'll learn new ways to approach problems.
Absolutely. So that would be my thing, is just instead of being passive with your life, instead of spending it in front of the TV or on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is, be a little bit active about your life and your future, because these little things, the little differences you make every single day compound upon each other, and eventually you'll be in places you couldn't have even imagined.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, and Aristotle talked about this in the Comic Key and Ethics, but the idea of, you know, feeling pleasure for the right things, telling yourself that educating yourself is fun, being positive about it will get you a lot further. A lot of us think, because of schooling, we think of homework as negative, as a chore. We think of learning as a chore, when really it's something that is empowering, exciting, fun. It's exploratory, it's experimental. I mean, I think when you really look at it in a positive way, it's easy to give up a half hour of TV to learn. It's easy, and before you know it, you'll be spending hours doing it at night instead of watching TV or instead of being on Facebook. I mean, if you really look at your day, there's always a way to cut out some of the arbitrary nonsense where you're just kind of passively experiencing and being active. But you have to kind of have the right attitude, right? You have to think of it as something you want to do, something positive. And once you do, it becomes really enjoyable. It's something you would never give up.
Yeah. So that being said, I think we should all take a look, being the beginning of the year, into what we can do to learn something new this year.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, that was a pleasure, Danny.
It was a pleasure, Andy. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And guys, make sure you like, subscribe, and click the notification bell or whatever you can do.
Do all that, please. It helps. Yeah, we'll be back next week with episode 16.
All right.
Excellent. Peace.